Throughout my time making content for Monster Hunter, I never really go too in-depth with the things that I talk about. Sure, talking about the lore and the monsters in the franchise could always make for an interesting video, but at the end of the day, I could never really go into a particular topic that isn't surface level, even for a casual Monster Hunter player. If you look at the type of videos that I've pumped out over the past couple of years on this channel, you'd probably understand why. From your basic cookie cutter let's play videos to the basic little discussion videos I've made in the past months, I haven't really gone too comprehensive in the things that I produce. And that kinda upsets me a little bit. So, in this video I'm going to try my best to make a more detailed and comprehensive video. This will be unfamiliar ground, so please bear with me because I just know I'm probably gonna make a few hiccups during the making of this video. But with that intro out of the way, let's talk about one weapon type that has absolutely dominated my playtime with Monster Hunter Rise all the way to Sunbreak. A weapon type that if you tell me a decade ago that I will use religiously in a Monster Hunter game, my younger self will look at you in complete bewilderment and disbelief. The weapon type in question is the dual blades. During my time playing Monster Hunter, from my first game all the way back in Tri, then all the way to Iceborne, I can say to you with confidence that I've only used more than one weapon type in a Monster Hunter game at least 3 times. The first being with Monster Hunter Tri, which let's be real isn't much to talk about in terms of weapon types, because it was the game that really didn't have much weapons compared to other games. And it was the first game in the franchise that actually cut out a number of weapon types away, so obviously I had just the amount of time and effort to experiment what Tri had to offer. And it was enjoyable. I love using the lance for the first time, and it was the only game in the whole series that I've actually touched a bowgun. The second game where I've actually bothered to use more than one weapon type was Freedom Unite. That was the game that introduced to me the gun lance, a weapon that got cut from Monster Hunter Tri, and when I found that out I was pretty upset. Because playing Gunlance in Freedom Unite made me fall in love with the weapon type, I distinctly remember using this thing against my first ever fight with the Tigrex, and I utterly obliterated that thing. The other weapon type that I fell in love with while playing Freedom Unite was the hammer, simply for how devastating it felt during the second generation. And the hammer was pretty much the only thing I used in the series ever since. From the release of Tri Ultimate all the way to World, I only know 2 things: Golf Swing and Super Pound. But for some reason everything changed when one day I really wanted to try the Insect Glaive in Iceborne. And that's because of just how fast and maneuverable you are in using it. And keep those 2 reasons in mind for later in the video. When I reflect on the fact that I rarely get to deviate in using different weapon types, it's actually quite disappointing from my perspective. Up to Iceborne, you have 14 weapon types that all possess new unique playstyles and gimmicks to keep the experience in playing the game exciting. So when Monster Hunter Rise was on the horizon in 2021, I swore to make sure I actually tried out more than one weapon type and actually experienced a Monster Hunter game to its fullest extent. And when Rise finally came out, I did just that, and the results varied. None of the ranged weapons really clicked with me. The longsword was fine but too overpowered in its playstyle, the charged blade was kind of fun, and the hunting horn was alright, but above all the rest of the weapon types, the one that really just grabbed my attention during my whole playthrough of Rise was of course the dual blades. And I've got to say, every aspect of this weapon type comes down to either mind-numbingly fun, game-breaking, or just downright easy mode. If you look at the dual blades in its iteration in Monster Hunter Rise, this thing is essentially the go-to weapon to get things done. If you're stuck on the Allmother, or if you think Val Strikes is just too hard, you go pick up the dual blades, and if you're careful enough, you could finish those hurdles without a cart. Guaranteed. Let's just go through a brief history on the dual blades quickly, and see why this particular weapon never really grabbed my attention when it was available. For being a fast-paced and DPS reliant weapon type on the previous games, the dual blades have always had some limitations to go along with the benefits you get from the weapon. And these points were present since its introduction in the first generation. One of the biggest mechanics of the dual blades is of course the demon mode. Not gonna lie, I've always thought of how cool this mechanic is, but the stamina decrease and the required use of dash juices to use this gimmick to its fullest potential really threw me off on using the dual blades. Additionally, in terms of mobility with the dual blades, it can't really be used effectively if you're in demon mode, which again relies on dash juices. Also, it really didn't help with this weapon type having the shortest reach out of the rest of the weapon types, so you have to be really up close with the target you're hunting. And back then, sharpness upkeep with the dual blades was kind of an issue. Of course, if you're using a weapon that deals out attacks in such a quick time window, you're going to see that sharpness meter go down drastically. So it will inevitably lead to constant disruptions to your gameplay with sharpening the weapon constantly. All in all, I wouldn't say that the dual blades is a restrictive weapon that requires tons of planning in order to use it effectively, but from my experiences, there really wasn't a major selling point to the weapon that really pushed me into using it extensively. And to be truthful, I've relied so heavily on the hammer that I didn't even know that the dual blades is more than just demon mode. From the different array of combos you can do with the weapon, to the introduction of Arc Demon mode, I have essentially just ignored the weapon so much that as the franchise evolves, so did the weapon type. But then Rise appeared, and goodness gracious did it overhaul the dual blades to such a ridiculous extent that all the drawbacks that I've mentioned previously in the older games have either been mitigated majorly or just basically removed altogether. Now of course you can't really talk about the improvements and new additions to a weapon type in Rise without bringing up the Y-bug mechanic. Most, if not all of the Silkbind moves rely on the Y-bugs, and most of the switch skills that involves the dual blades has pretty much rendered the weapon type into an absolute powerhouse in both quickness and maneuverability, as well as solving the past limitations that previously held the weapon back in becoming an overpowered mess. Let's start off with just how ridiculously fast this thing is. I don't know much about motion values, but my god is this thing fast. So quick that you'll be able to fill up that demon meter so quickly that you'll be in Arc Demon mode throughout the entirety of a fight, every single time. And being in this constant state of Arc Demon mode really adds to improving the dual blade's overall maneuverability. With how much quickly you can move around, coupled with being in Arc Demon mode all the time, you can run rings around the monster consistently. And just as long as you're not spamming the blade dance, you're all over the place, more than anyone should be comfortable with. And this aspect of being quick and maneuverable really doesn't stop on the ground. With the use of Silkbind attacks, dare I say you can beat an Insect Glaive main in the air. Now obviously the dual blades doesn't have the comprehensive moveset of the Insect Glaive in the air. You really only have two ways to be maneuverable mid-air, but I promise you they are more than enough for the weapon to genuinely have its own aerial style of play. Firstly, Tower Vault. Don't know why, but loads of people are sleeping on this move. Yes, it doesn't deal damage, but when you're up in the air, you actually have a handful of options. You could either evade away from a monster, do a basic aerial attack, or go into demon mode and connect with a mid-air blade dance. That ridiculous move where you spin through a monster's entire body. And this is actually useful for keeping your demon meter full. And last but most importantly, the Demon Flight. Hands down, this is the most fun Silkbind move in the whole game. Well, for me at least. Not only will you vault into the air without using a Y-bug, but you have two benefits to using this move. One, connecting this attack while in demon mode will immediately put you into a mid-air blade dance. And two, if you time it right, you can evade literally anything. From a monster attack to a roar, this Silkbind move is utterly insane. You are genuinely spoiled for choice with the options you have in terms of movement and speed, both on the ground and in mid-air. Speaking of demon mode, never have I completely disregarded the stamina bar in a Monster Hunter game than in Rise. I'm sorry, but with the use of endemic life like the Pepper Sex and the Yellow Spirit Birds, plus with the amount of times you could go in and out of demon mode, you are constantly in and around Arc Demon mode throughout most of the fight. Worrying about your stamina feels completely forgotten and it just feels weird. And this really kills two birds with one stone. Demon mode has become more accessible while being less consequential than ever, and your mobility isn't reliant on dash juices like in the older games. Oh, and remember that point about the dual blades having the shortest reach out of the other weapon types? Well, so many moves have got you covered in that regard. Demon Flurry Rush and the new Slide Slash combo has this weird thing where you are passively advancing to the monster whilst being on the move, to the point where you're adjusting your position so frequently that the monster is never out of reach to you. And of course, Tower Vault just adds more to where you could go to land your attacks while in the air. And about that sharpness problem earlier, well, one of the new utility moves that have been added in the expansion is the Iron Shine Silk, a new Silkbind move that allows you to recover sharpness while evading through attacks. Now, it may not completely solve the weapon type sharpness management entirely, but with how much you'll be using Shrouded Vault throughout the fight, this new Silkbind move does come in useful in keeping the damage going while not disrupting the fight for sharpening. Plus, it only costs one wire bug to use. With the skill swap mechanic, both these skills go hand in hand so seamlessly that it really adds to the depth to how you can maintain the overall effectiveness to dealing damage. Goodness, I really feel as though the devs have gone out of their way to get rid of all the dual blades imperfections and just went with turning this thingy into a total mess. And now that all of the problems that this weapon type has had in the past has been solved in some way or another, I feel I should wrap this up quickly by discussing some of the new moves and silkbind attacks that truly made the dual blades absolutely incredible to play with in Rise. Let's start off with a silkbind move that I really can't leave without every time I use the dual blades, the Feral Demon mode. This move was taken out of Generations Ultimate as the Wolf's Maw, a hunter art that doubles the amount of hits you do when you attack, and you get a cool effect in your character's face when you use it. Now the bad news is you don't get that cool eye glowing effect anymore with the Feral Demon mode, but the good news is you'll be more offensive while in this state. As if the dual blades isn't already a highly offensive weapon, every action you do while in this state, from evading to dashing around, all of it counts as an attack. Now it doesn't do much damage and you really can't rely on it for maximizing your DPS too much, but you'll be surprised as to how quickly you'll be filling up your demon meter, and this goes back with being in and out of Archdemon mode so frequently. You're always keeping up in maintaining your powered state is honestly crazy. I've already mentioned Shrouded Vault earlier, but it goes without saying that this move is just awesome as it is simple. A monster attacks you, you evade through it, you do damage while evading through it, and you get a cool animation for doing so. It's such a basic move that's added into the game. It isn't as damaging or flashy as some silkbind moves for other weapon types, but Shrouded Vault makes up for it by simply being a useful and a move that just works. It's there to do its job as an evasive move, and it completes that role perfectly. And it's even more useful now with the Iron Shrine move giving it more utility. Simply a good silkbind that I just can't go without. And finally, I'll be rounding this part off with one of the new introductions to the dual blade silkbind moveset, and one that I've been waiting for ever since its cameo in one of the first trailers for Sunbreak, the Spiral Slash. Another move that's returning from Generations Ultimate, once as Spiral Slice, a hunter art that launches the player at a monster to deal multiple hits in a tornado motion. This iteration now adds more to what that hunter art can do. Back in Gen Ultimate, Spiral Slice is a rather simple move to use. You can only launch yourself at a target in the direction that you are facing, and that's it. With Spiral Slash however in Sunbreak, not only could you launch yourself like in Generations Ultimate, but now you can use the move while in mid-air. This pairs nicely with Demon Flight, as you can do this move mid-combo while in the air, and it also counts as a great finisher to whatever combo you are doing. And lastly, like Shrouded Vault, it only costs one wire bug to use, meaning you don't ever really need to worry if you have a wire bug available when you're using this move. What makes this whole thing interesting is that God forbid Spiral Slice didn't get added into Sunbreak, you'd actually still have a solid moveset with this weapon. Granted, I would be pissed if they didn't add anything for the dual blades, but regardless, I do feel as though what you still have with the dual blades in base Rise is more than enough to help you in going through most of Sunbreak, as insane as that sounds. But aside from that, I haven't even mentioned the rest of the moves like Piercing Bind or the new Slide Slash combo. There is genuinely more to this weapon if you delve deeper into it. Over the course of playing through Rise and all the way to the new expansion, I feel as though the time taken to complete this entry into the franchise has just flew by me. And one of the major contributing factors to that is the fact that the majority of my playing time has been dominated with using the dual blades throughout Rise. It doesn't necessarily mean that I've skimmed through the game too quickly, or that I rushed through the content during the week. Honestly, I do remember my playtime with this game fairly well, and it just so happens that most of my time playing Rise mostly includes me using the dual blades. And it doesn't even end with the amount of playtime. That's just one factor that I added at the start of the video. I didn't even mention the amount of depth that the dual blades have in this game, the various amount of playstyles and ways you can approach to a fight with this weapon, but most importantly, and I'm going to end this video with this last factor, just the insane amount of fun you can have when using the dual blades. It's honestly just the enjoyability of using this weapon type that definitely counts as a major reason as to why I fell in love with it. Now the bad news is, I don't think we will ever have this iteration of the dual blades in a future Monster Hunter game ever again. We will never get to have this level of insanity to a weapon type again in a Monster Hunter game. For obvious reasons, of course. I mean, if I could, I would love if they bring back Demon Flight and Spiral Slash to Monster Hunter 6, but they probably won't, and all the craziness that I've experienced when playing Rise with this weapon is gone. And I'm just thankful that at least it happened, and that the dual blades is one of the most enjoyable things that I get to witness when playing Monster Hunter Rise. And that has been it for this unreasonably long video. Please do not leave yourself out of the discussion. Do leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, do leave a like at the end, and I shall see you later.